The fluorescent lights in the ICU waiting room had a way of making everything feel unreal. I'd been sitting in that same plastic chair for 14 hours straight, watching the clock on the wall tick forward, while my grandson fought for his life 3 doors down. The antiseptic smell burned my nostrils, and every time those automatic doors whooshed open, my heart would skip, wondering if this was the moment a doctor would come tell me it was over. David was only 16. 16. The same age I was when I came to this country with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. He had his whole life ahead of him, a scholarship to Northwestern, a girlfriend who made him laugh, a jump shot that had college scouts calling our house every week. And now he was lying in a bed with tubes coming out of every part of him because some drunk driver ran a red light on Lakeshore Drive. My hands shook as I held the styrofoam cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. I couldn't drink it anyway. My stomach had been in knots since I got that phone call at 3 a.m. "Mr. Chen, there's been an accident. You need to come to Memorial Hospital right away." The waiting room was mostly empty at this hour, just me, and a young couple in the corner who looked like they'd been crying for days. I wanted to tell them it would be okay, but what did I know? What did any of us know in this place where life and death balanced on the edge of a scalpel? "Mr. Chen?" I looked up to see a doctor approaching. Not David's regular doctor, this was someone new. Tall, silver-haired, wearing scrubs that looked too crisp, too clean. He had the kind of confidence that came from years of being the smartest person in the room. "I'm Dr. Harrison Blake," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, practiced. "I'm the head of our transplant surgery department. I wanted to talk to you about David's condition." Something about the way he said transplant made my blood run cold, but I pushed the feeling down. I was just a tired old man who didn't understand medical things. I needed to listen to the experts. "How is he?" I asked, my voice rough from disuse. Dr. Blake sat down next to me, and I noticed he didn't quite meet my eyes. "I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Chen. David's injuries were severe. The impact caused significant trauma to his brain. We've been monitoring him closely." And he paused, letting the silence stretch out. "The tests we've run suggest that there's very little brain activity." "But he's breathing," I said quickly. "I saw him. His chest is moving." "That's the ventilator," Dr. Blake explained, his tone gentle but firm. "The machine is breathing for him. Without it, David wouldn't be able to sustain life on his own." I felt like the floor was falling away beneath me. "So what are you saying?" "We need to run some additional tests. But I wanted to prepare you for the possibility that David may be brain dead." He let those words hang in the air between us. I know this is incredibly difficult to hear. "Brain dead." I repeated the words, but they didn't make sense. "But he's alive. His heart is beating." "His body is alive because of the machines," Dr. Blake said. He pulled out a tablet and showed me some scans. I couldn't understand black and white images that might as well have been written in a foreign language. "See this area here? This is where we should be seeing activity, but there's nothing. David isn't coming back from this, Mr. Chen. I'm truly sorry." I stared at the images, trying to make sense of them, trying to find some sign that the doctor was wrong. But what did I know about brain scans? I'd worked in a factory for 40 years, running the same machine day after day. I fixed things with my hands, not my mind. These doctors, they went to school for decades. They knew things I couldn't even imagine. "How long?" I managed to ask. "We'll run the formal brain death tests tomorrow morning," Dr. Blake said. "But Mr. Chen, I want to talk to you about something important. Something that could give meaning to this tragedy." I looked at him, confused. David's organs are healthy. His heart, his lungs, his kidneys, they could save lives. Multiple lives. There are people on waiting lists right now. People who are dying because they can't find a donor match. David could be a hero. He could save 6, maybe 7 people. The words crashed over me like a wave. Donate David's organs. Cut him up and give his parts to strangers. I felt bile rise in my throat. "I know this is a lot to process, Doctor," Blake continued, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "But time is critical. The longer we wait, the less viable the organs become. If we can get your consent now, we can start the process as soon as we confirm brain death tomorrow." "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "I can't make that decision. His parents. David's parents are deceased, correct? Dr. Blake said. And I noticed he'd already known that. He'd done his homework. You're his legal guardian. The decision is yours. But his sister, my daughter, Michelle, is she local? No. She lives in D.C. But, Mr. Chen, I understand you want to wait, but we're talking about other people's lives here. Children who need hearts. Mothers who need kidneys. Every hour we delay is an hour someone else might die waiting for the organ David could give them. Something about the way he said it felt wrong. Too pushy. Too fast. But I was so tired, and my head was pounding, and all I could think about was David lying in that bed with machines keeping him alive. Can I see him? I asked. Dr. Blake hesitated. The formal tests are scheduled for 6 a.m. It might be better if you wait until after. I want to see my grandson. My voice came out harder than I intended. Dr. Blake's smile tightened. Of course. But I need you to understand what you'll see might not be David anymore. The person you knew is gone. What's left is just a body being kept alive by machines. He led me down the hallway, and I noticed how the nurses looked away as we passed. Their eyes were sympathetic, but there was something else there too. Something I couldn't quite name. David's room was dim, just the glow of monitors and the rhythmic beep of machines. He looked so small in that bed, so young. His face was swollen, bruised, but it was still him. Still my grandson who used to sit on my lap and listen to my stories, who'd taught me how to use my smartphone, who'd promised to take me to his first college game. I pulled a chair close to the bed and took his hand. It was warm. How could he be dead if his hand was still warm? I'm here, David, I whispered. Grandpa's here. I don't know how long I sat there, just holding his hand and watching his chest rise and fall with the ventilator. The clock on the wall said it was 2 a.m. I'd been at the hospital for over 12 hours, and that's when I saw it. His finger moved, just the smallest twitch against my palm, but I felt it. My heart jumped. David? I leaned forward. David, can you hear me? I watched his hand carefully, waiting. Nothing. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was so desperate for hope that I was seeing things that weren't there. But then it happened again. A definite movement. His index finger curled slightly against my palm. I practically ran to the door. Nurse! Nurse! He moved. His hand moved. A nurse came quickly, a young woman with kind eyes. She checked the monitors, looked at David, and then turned to me with a sad smile. Mr. Chen, sometimes the body has reflexes. It doesn't mean he's conscious or aware. No, I felt it. He squeezed my hand. I understand how difficult this is, she said gently. But spinal reflexes can cause movement even after brain death. It's common, and it can be very hard for families to witness. I wanted to argue, but what could I say? She was the medical professional. I was just an old man grasping at straws. When Dr. Blake came by an hour later to check if I'd made a decision, I told him about the movement. He didn't even look surprised. Spinal reflexes, he said, echoing the nurse. I know it seems meaningful, but it's just the body's automatic responses. The brain isn't involved at all. But how can you be sure? The tests we'll run tomorrow will confirm it, he said. Look, Mr. Chen, I don't want to pressure you, but we have a 14-year-old girl downstairs in the cardiac unit. She's been on the transplant list for 6 months. She has the same blood type as David. His heart could save her life, but only if we act quickly. Her name is Emma. She likes to draw. She wants to be an artist someday. Don't you want David's death to mean something? I felt trapped. On one side, there was David, who might not be as gone as they said. On the other, there was Emma, a girl I'd never met, but who was dying because she couldn't get a heart. I need to call my daughter, I said finally. Dr. Blake's face tightened. Of course. But remember, time is critical. I went back to the waiting room and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. Michelle and I hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since the argument after her mother's funeral. I'd said things I regretted. She'd said worse. And then silence. But she needed to know about David. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. Hello? Her voice was groggy, suspicious. Michelle, it's Dad. Silence. Then, do you know what time it is? It's David, There was an accident. Everything changed in her voice. What happened? Is he okay? I told her everything, the drunk driver, the brain injury, Dr. Blake, the organ donation. My voice broke several times, but I got through it. Wait, Michelle said, and I could hear her moving, getting dressed maybe. Slow down. They want you to sign off on organ donation already? They said they need to do it soon, before the organs become less viable. How long has he been in the ICU? About 15 hours. 15 hours? Her voice rose. Dad, that's way too fast. Brain death determination requires multiple tests over an extended period. They can't just declare someone brain dead after 15 hours. The doctor said they'd do formal tests in the morning. What doctor? What's his name? Dr. Harrison Blake. He's the head of transplant surgery. I heard her intake of breath. Transplant surgery is pushing this? He said there's a girl who needs David's heart. A 14-year-old. Dad, listen to me very carefully. Do not sign anything. Do not give them permission for any tests you don't fully understand. I'm getting on the first flight to Chicago. Michelle, I don't think you understand, they said. I understand perfectly. Her voice was hard now, professional. I'm a medical ethics investigator for the Department of Health and Human Services. This is what I do. And what you're describing sounds wrong. Very wrong. I thought you worked in policy review or something. I investigate misconduct in organ procurement. Dad, in the last 6 months, I've been looking into several cases of premature brain death declarations at hospitals with aggressive transplant programs. Some of these doctors have financial incentives tied to successful organ harvests. My blood ran cold. You think David's doctor would? I don't know anything yet, but I'm not taking chances with my nephew's life. I'll be there in 6 hours. Until then, you tell them you're waiting for family to arrive. If they push you, you tell them your daughter is flying in and she's a federal medical ethics investigator. That should slow them down. Michelle, my voice cracked. I'm sorry for everything, for what I said at your mother's funeral, for pushing you away. I'm so sorry. We'll talk about that later, she said, but her voice was softer. Right now, just protect David. Don't let them bully you. You're his advocate. Nobody loves him like we do. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since David's accident. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of a grieving old man, but something solid, real. Dr. Blake came by again at 4 a.m. Mr. Chen, have you made a decision? My daughter's flying in. We'll decide together. His jaw tightened. We really can't wait much longer. The window for viable organ procurement is... My daughter is a federal medical ethics investigator, I said, the words giving me strength. She specializes in organ procurement. She'll be here in a few hours. I watched his face change. It was subtle, but it was there. Fear, calculation, and then the professional mask sliding back into place. Well, of course, we want to make sure the family is comfortable with the process, he said smoothly. I'll push the tests back until she arrives. After he left, I went back to David's room. I sat with him, held his hand, and talked to him about everything and nothing. I told him about the summer he was 8, and I taught him how to fish. About the time he scored 30 points in the championship game, and I cheered so loud I lost my voice. About how proud I was of the man he was becoming. And I swear, as I talked, I felt his hand squeeze mine. Not reflexes, not spinal nerves, something more. Michelle arrived at 9 a.m., looking exhausted but determined. She'd barely stepped off the plane before driving straight to the hospital. When she walked into the waiting room, I stood up, unsure if she'd even want to hug me after all this time. She wrapped her arms around me, and I felt 3 years of silence crack open. Show me everything, she said. I gave her all the paperwork Dr. Blake had provided. She read through it, her expression growing darker with each page. This is preliminary at best, she said. These aren't comprehensive brain death tests. These are screening tests. And look at the timing they ran these at 1 a.m., just hours after admission. Is that wrong? It's rushed. Proper brain death determination should involve multiple tests over at least 12 to 24 hours, sometimes longer. And it should be done by neurologists, not transplant surgeons. Dr. Blake is a transplant surgeon? Exactly. He has a conflict of interest. He shouldn't be anywhere near the brain death determination process. She stood up. I need to see David, and then I need to see his full medical records. All of them. When we entered David's room, Michelle went straight to the monitors. She studied them for a long time, then examined David carefully. Has anyone done a transcranial Doppler? She asked. I don't know what that is. It measures blood flow to the brain. It's one of the standard tests for brain death determination. She picked up the chart at the foot of the bed. There's no record of it here. Maybe they haven't done it yet, or maybe they don't want to, because it might show brain activity. She turned to me, her face serious. Dad, I think something very wrong is happening here. Dr. Blake arrived 20 minutes later, his professional smile firmly in place. You must be Michelle. I'm Dr. Blake. I'm so sorry about your nephew. I reviewed the preliminary tests you ordered, Michelle said, her voice cold. They're insufficient for brain death determination. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I can assure you, I don't feel any way about it. It's fact. You haven't conducted transcranial Doppler studies, you haven't completed repeat clinical examinations, and the apnea test wasn't properly documented. Dr. Blake's smile tightened. Miss Chen, I understand you're upset, but I am a board-certified surgeon with over 20 years of experience. I think I know how to determine brain death. You're a transplant surgeon, not a neurologist. You have a financial conflict of interest in this case. According to hospital policy and medical ethics guidelines, you shouldn't be involved in brain death determination at all. I don't appreciate your implication. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. I'm a medical ethics investigator with the Department of Health and Human Services, and I'm formally requesting David Chen's complete medical records, including all communications regarding his case and any documentation related to potential organ recipients. Dr. Blake's face went pale. That's not standard procedure. It is when I have reasonable suspicion of improper organ procurement protocols. Michelle pulled out her credentials. I'm invoking my authority under the National Organ Transplant Act. You have 2 hours to provide the requested documentation. I'll need to consult with hospital administration. You do that. And while you're at it, inform them that no further brain death testing will be conducted on David Chen until a completely independent neurologist, with no ties to the transplant program, performs a comprehensive evaluation. After Dr. Blake left, practically running, Michelle turned to me. This is going to get ugly, Dad. Are you ready? I looked at David, lying so still in the bed. What do you think is happening? I think Dr. Blake has been pressuring families to consent to organ donation before proper brain death protocols are followed. I think he's cutting corners, possibly falsifying tests, to get viable organs, and I think David might not be as brain dead as Blake wants us to believe. My hands clenched into fists. If he hurt my grandson, let me handle this the right way. Legal. By the book. That's how we make sure he can never do this to another family. Over the next 6 hours, Michelle transformed into someone I barely recognized. The daughter I'd known was quiet, bookish, always avoiding conflict. This woman was a force of nature. She requested files, interviewed nurses, demanded to speak with hospital administration. She made phone calls to colleagues at the Department of Health, got court orders, and gathered evidence like a detective building a case. And what she found was damning. Dr. Blake had been involved in 12 cases over the past 18 months where brain death had been declared unusually quickly. In 4 of those cases, family members had later complained that they felt pressured or rushed. In 2 cases, patients had shown signs of neurological function that were dismissed as reflexes. Most disturbing of all, Michelle found emails between Dr. Blake and the hospital's transplant coordinator discussing acquisition targets and procurement timelines. David wasn't a patient to them. He was inventory. We need to move him, Michelle said on the second day, to a different hospital with doctors who aren't connected to any of this. Can we do that? I'm getting a court order. Judge Morrison is an old friend. He'll grant it. But before we could move David, something incredible happened. I was sitting with him late that night, around 2 a.m., the same time I'd been there when this all started. Michelle had finally gone back to my apartment to shower and sleep for a few hours. It was just me and David and the machines. I was telling him about his grandmother, my wife Sarah, who'd passed 5 years ago. How she used to make him those terrible oatmeal cookies he pretended to love. How she'd believed in him even when he doubted himself. And then his eyes opened. Not all the way. Just a flutter, barely visible. But they opened. "David?" My voice shook. "David, can you hear me?" His eyes moved, tracking toward my voice. Slowly, like he was fighting through deep water. But they moved. I hit the call button so hard I nearly broke it. The night nurse came running. When she saw David's eyes open, she gasped. "Get a neurologist," I said. "Now. Not Dr. Blake. A Hale neurologist." Within an hour, David's room was full of doctors, real ones, neurologists who had no connection to the transplant program. They ran tests, shined lights in his eyes, checked his reflexes. "This is remarkable," one of them said. "He's showing clear signs of consciousness. His pupils are reactive. He's following commands with his eyes." "But Dr. Blake said he was brain dead," I said. The neurologist's face darkened. "Dr. Blake was wrong. Very wrong. This young man is not brain dead. He's not even in a deep coma. He's in what we call a minimally conscious state. With proper treatment and rehabilitation, he could potentially make a significant recovery." I called Michelle immediately. She arrived within 20 minutes, still in her pajamas. When she saw David's eyes open, she started crying. Actually crying, something I hadn't seen her do since she was a little girl. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, taking his hand. "We're here. We're not going anywhere." David's finger moved against her palm, a definite squeeze. The police arrived the next morning. Michelle had filed a formal complaint, and once the neurologists confirmed David was nowhere near brain dead, it became a criminal investigation. They found everything. Emails showing Dr. Blake had financial bonuses tied to successful organ procurements. Text messages with the transplant coordinator discussing how to manage families who were hesitant to donate. Records showing he'd systematically rushed brain death declarations to increase his department's numbers. Most damning of all, they found he'd falsified some of the preliminary tests on David. The brain scans he'd shown me were from a different patient entirely, someone who actually was brain dead. David's real scans showed significant brain activity. Activity that any competent doctor would have recognized as incompatible with brain death. Dr. Blake was arrested on charges of attempted fraud, medical malpractice, and a dozen other counts. The hospital's transplant program was suspended pending investigation, and Michelle's department opened formal inquiries into every brain death case Blake had been involved with. But the real miracle was David. It took months, but he recovered. Not completely, he had some memory issues, and his right side was weaker than his left. The scholarship to Northwestern was gone, but he got a full ride to DePaul instead. He had to give up basketball, but he became a volunteer coach for kids in our neighborhood. And he was alive. He was alive. And he was my grandson. And every day with him was a gift I'd almost let someone steal. Michelle and I spent those months rebuilding what we'd broken 3 years ago. We talked about Mom, about our regrets, about all the time we'd wasted being angry at each other. David's hospital room became a place of healing for all of us. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you after Mom died," Michelle said one evening while David was sleeping. "We were sitting in the hospital cafeteria, drinking terrible coffee. I was so angry at the world, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to choose between your career and family," I said. "Your mother would have been so proud of what you do. She'd be proud of you too. You saved David's life. You trusted your instincts when everyone was telling you you were wrong. I almost didn't. I almost signed those papers. But you didn't. That's what matters." The trial happened 9 months later. Michelle testified as an expert witness, explaining how Dr. Blake had systematically violated every protocol designed to protect patients and families. The prosecutors played recordings of him pressuring grieving families. They showed the falsified records, the financial incentives, the pattern of behavior. He got 15 years. The hospital paid a massive settlement to every family he'd victimized, and new protocols were put in place across the state to prevent this from ever happening again. But for me, the real justice came 3 years after that terrible night. David graduated from college. I sat in the audience, wearing my best suit, watching him walk across that stage in his cap and gown. Michelle sat next to me, holding my hand. After the ceremony, David came over with his girlfriend, not the one from high school, but a new one, a smart girl studying law who wanted to advocate for patient rights. "This is for you, Grandpa," he said, showing me his diploma. "None of this happens without you." "And Aunt Michelle," I said. "She's the one who saved you." "You both did," David said. "You didn't give up on me when everyone said I was gone. You fought for me." That night, we had dinner at my apartment, just the three of us. David told us stories about college, about his friends, about his dreams for the future. Michelle talked about her work, about how David's case had led to reforms that had already saved lives. And I just listened, grateful beyond words that I had this moment, this family, this second chance. Sometimes I think about that night in the hospital, about how close we came to losing David, about how Dr. Blake's smooth voice almost convinced me to give up, about how easy it would have been to just sign the papers and let my grandson's organs save other people's children. But then I think about what Michelle told me once, after all of this was over. "The system was designed to pressure you," she said. "They use guilt, they use urgency, they use your grief against you. It's not your fault you almost believed them, but you trusted your instincts. You felt David squeeze your hand, and you believed it was real, even when they told you it was nothing. That's the difference between a number on a chart and a human life. You knew your grandson was still in there, fighting to come back." David still has nightmares sometimes, about the accident, about waking up in the hospital and not understanding what had happened. But he's alive, he's thriving, and every time I see him, every time I hear his laugh or watch him coach those kids in our neighborhood gym, I know we did the right thing. Dr. Blake tried to appeal his sentence, claiming he was just doing his job, that he truly believed those patients were brain dead. The appeal was denied. Good, because here's what I learned from all of this. The people you trust most are sometimes the ones who will hurt you worst. The professionals with their degrees and their authority and their smooth voices, they're human too. They make mistakes, they get greedy, they convince themselves that the ends justify the means. But a grandfather's love? That's not something you can falsify. That's not something you can rush or pressure or manipulate. When I felt David's hand squeeze mine, I knew. I knew in my bones that my grandson was still fighting, still there, still worth fighting for. And sometimes, the people you've pushed away are the ones who save you. Michelle and I lost 3 years because of pride and grief and anger. But when it mattered most, when David's life hung in the balance, she came through. She used everything she'd learned, every skill she'd developed in that career I'd once resented, to save her nephew. That's what family does. We hurt each other. We fail each other. But when the world tries to take everything from us, we stand together. David starts medical school next fall. He wants to be a neurologist, to help people like him who are trapped in that space between life and death. He wants to make sure no other family has to fight like we did. I tell him I'm proud of him, but more than that, I'm grateful. Grateful he's here. Grateful for every ordinary moment we get to share. Grateful that I listen to my heart instead of my fear. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Dr. Blake, about how many families he convinced to give up hope, about the patients who might have recovered if given time, about the grief he inflicted in the name of helping others. And then I look at David's graduation photo on my wall, and I think, not this time, not my grandson. You didn't win. We did.